A question that I think that bands should ask themselves is, who needs a vocal microphone? It's one of the first questions that I ask when I'm setting up for a band that's coming in is, what do we need for vocal mics? And I get a variety of answers, everything from, oh, we just need a single mic up front, or a couple mics up front, to everybody in the band needs a mic. And I've worked with some bands that have great singers, and everybody in the band is a great singer. And that's fantastic. You get these delicious multi-part vocal harmonies. The band has the ability to switch lead singers with different songs, and having that kind of talent, it's fantastic. Oftentimes I work with bands who have one or two really strong singers and a few other players who are pitching in some background harmonies. And sometimes that's great. And sometimes those backing singers would readily admit that they're not a very good singer, but they can help with the harmonies a bit. Sometimes those people are not exactly perfect pitch. And I've had my thoughts of thinking, maybe these harmonies would actually be better without the addition of people who are not right on pitch. I think a lot of bands will say everybody needs a mic, just in case somebody wants to throw in a comment during a break. And I've worked with plenty of bands who I've put up mics for everybody, and some of the people on stage don't use them at all throughout the evening. And this is actually a detriment, because having an open mic on stage is going to increase the amount of background noise and splash that comes into the mix. This is particularly true in the case of drummers, where their vocal mic is just a foot or less far away from their snare drum. So I'm getting all kinds of snare drum and toms bleeding into their vocal mic, which doesn't mix with the drum mics really well. And so having open mics on stage is certainly not going to contribute positively to the clarity and sound of your mix. The other issue is that the more open mics you have, the greater chance that one of those mics could experience some feedback. And as the sound guy, I don't have any kind of big alarm indicator as to which channel is feeding back. It can sometimes be a bit of a challenge to determine which one is the source of the trouble, especially if that feedback isn't completely out of control and it's just doing a little bit of ringing in the mix. And if it's that sort of situation where one of the mics is just a little bit unstable and not contributing nicely to the mix, and I'm hearing some ringing feedback coming through, it can be really hard to tell which one of the 7 vocal mics is doing it. And so I find myself going through one at a time, trying to knock the gains back a little bit on the different channels to try to identify which one is causing the trouble. Or if I have the opportunity, maybe I'll be hitting mute on those various channels for a moment to see if that sound stops. And so having a bunch of open mics on stage doesn't help the sound of your band and can make the band a little tougher to mix. And so I'm distracted trying to chase down that issue rather than devoting all of my attention to really getting that mix perfectly dialed up. I can almost hear the objection now. Some people will say this whole problem can be taken care of through the use of gates. Just put gates in your vocal mics, and that way, when people are not singing into the mics, the gates kick in and knock the level down. They either mute the mics or knock it down by 10 or 12 dB or so. And so that cuts the background splash coming through the mic, but it still allows the mic to open up and let the singer come through. Well, I think gates are a great tool, and I use them all the time, but I don't think that they're a perfect solution either. One thing is that when the singer is singing, the gate is opened up, and that is, of course, allowing the background splash to come through the microphone at those points in time when they're singing. And then when the gate closes, it reduces the amount of output from that microphone. And so you actually can hear the background getting pumped up and down as the gates are opening and closing. That can be a little distracting. Also, there's a fairly narrow range of gate settings that you must achieve in order to get good switching action, where it always lets the vocals through, but it never lets the background through. Those switching actions are also often heard through the stage monitors as well as the front of house. And so the folks on stage may be aware that the microphones are sort of turning on and turning off as they use them, and that can be distracting on stage. The gates also are, on one hand, effective at reducing feedback issues that might be occurring, but at the same time, they sort of mask the problem and make it harder for you to find those feedback issues and really take care of them at their root. So I think gates have a place. I think they're a great tool, but I don't think that they're a real solution to this problem. The other thing is that you need to set the gate thresholds high enough so that they're not opening up the microphones during the background splash of the band when people aren't singing. But then when the band takes a quick break, like between songs, and if there's some banter among the folks up on stage and somebody calls out to somebody else and that other person responds quietly, their quiet response might not be loud enough to overcome the gates that have been set to a threshold to keep all of the background band splash out of the mics while they're playing. So if somebody calls over to the bass guitar player with some comment and he just responds with, "Oh, yeah, I guess that's right," that might not be enough. And it's most disconcerting when people try to use the mic and it's not there for them. So if you use gates, the band probably should be aware of what you're doing, and you should make everybody aware that they actually have to speak up into those microphones with a little bit of gusto in order to make sure that that channel opens up and gives them the microphone that they're expecting to have. So I think gates are a great tool, but I don't think that they are a 100% solution in this situation. So for these reasons, I would suggest, if you're in a band, that you give some due consideration to who really needs to have a mic. And if they don't really need to have a mic, if they're not contributing a lot to the band's vocals, you'd probably be better off to not put an open mic at that position. This goes back to my belief that in a lot of cases, a lot of times, less is more. So just a quick tip from Barry the sound guy, which is try to minimize the number of open microphones you can have on stage to maximize the clarity and the good, clean mix that you can deliver to your audience. Hope you enjoyed the tip, and I hope you choose to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you do subscribe, please hit that bell for notifications of future videos, and I'll talk to you again on another upcoming episode.